Most people spend years searching for their purpose and never find it, not because it doesn't exist, but because they're looking in the wrong direction entirely. Purpose isn't out there waiting to be discovered. It's already inside you, buried under everything you've been told to be. Strip that away and it surfaces on its own. In this video, I'll show you number 1, why searching for purpose outward is the exact move that keeps you stuck. Number 2, what the false self actually is and how it hijacks your sense of who you are. Number 3, a concrete process for removing the conditioning that's been blocking your purpose from view. Let's get into it. A man I spoke with a few years ago had done everything right. Good degree, VP title by 35, house, family, the full picture. He came to me because he felt hollow. Not depressed exactly, just empty. He said, I built the life I was supposed to want and I still don't know who I am. That sentence stopped me. Not, I don't know what I want. He said, I don't know who I am. That's the real problem underneath the purpose question. And it's far more common than anyone admits. The man I just described spent 3 years after that conversation trying different things. He took an online course in photography. He tried starting a podcast. He read every book with the word purpose in the title. None of it landed, and the reason is simple. He was still using the wrong method. When most people try to find their purpose, they ask outward questions. What career feels meaningful? What cause should I support? What would I do if money weren't a factor? These aren't bad questions, but they're the second question, not the first. If you don't know who's doing the asking, no answer will stick. Vedic philosophy has a concept called svabhava. It translates roughly as one's own nature, not the nature you perform for others, not the nature shaped by your upbringing or your fear of disappointing people. The nature you were born with, the particular configuration of qualities, drives, and sensitivities that is specifically you. The Bhagavad Gita makes a striking claim about this. It says it is better to perform your own duty imperfectly than to perform another's duty perfectly. That sounds almost counterintuitive. But what it's pointing at is this. When you live according to your actual nature, even the struggle feels right. When you live according to someone else's expectations, even the success feels hollow. Modern research backs this up in a way that might surprise you. Studies on meaning and purpose consistently show that people who report high life meaning don't necessarily have the most impressive goals or the most exciting careers. What they have is a clear sense of their core values and a life that reflects those values. The alignment between who they are and what they do is what creates the feeling of purpose, not the thing itself. So the problem isn't that purpose is hidden somewhere out there and you haven't found the right map. The problem is that the outward search keeps you from the only place purpose actually lives, which is your own undistorted nature. The takeaway here is this. Before you ask, what is my purpose? Ask, who is doing the asking? If you can't answer that clearly, the purpose question will keep looping. The Vedic tradition has another concept that maps almost perfectly onto what modern psychology calls the constructed self. They call it ahamkara. Literally translated, it means the I maker, the faculty of the mind that creates a story about who you are. Ahamkara isn't your enemy, it's a tool. The mind needs a stable identity to function in the world. The problem is when the tool becomes the master, when the story the eye maker tells becomes so loud and so familiar that you stop questioning whether it's actually true. Think about how your identity was formed. You were born with a particular temperament. Then your parents responded to that temperament in certain ways. Teachers labeled you, peers accepted or rejected you. You learned very quickly which parts of yourself were safe to show and which parts needed to be hidden or suppressed. By the time you were a teenager, you had a fully constructed persona, a version of yourself designed for social survival. That persona is not you, it's an adaptation. And the tragedy is that most people live their entire adult lives inside that adaptation without ever questioning it. They pursue careers their parents approved of. They suppress interests that don't fit the image. They feel a pull towards something but dismiss it because it doesn't make sense given who they've decided they are. The false ego, what Vedic philosophy calls the ahankara-driven identity, operates through three primary filters. The first is what will people think? The second is what am I supposed to want? The third is what is safe to pursue. Every decision that runs through those three filters moves you further from your actual nature and deeper into the constructed one. The research on this is striking. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people who scored high on what researchers call self alienation, meaning the degree to which they feel disconnected from their authentic self, also scored significantly lower on measures of life meaning and purpose, not just happiness, meaning specifically. So the false self doesn't just make you feel inauthentic. It actively blocks the experience of purpose. Because purpose, real purpose, can only be felt by the real you. The constructed version of you can achieve things, it can earn things, it can perform things, but it cannot feel meaning, because meaning requires contact with your actual nature. The practical implication of this is uncomfortable. It means that some of what you've built, some of the choices you've made, may not be yours, not because you're broken, but because you were operating from a self that was shaped by forces outside you. Recognizing that isn't a failure, it's the beginning of the actual work. The Vedic process for self knowledge is not a weekend retreat, but there is a specific practice at its core that you can start today, and it's simpler than you'd expect. The Sanskrit term is viveka. It means discernment, the capacity to distinguish between what is real and what is superimposed. In the context of how to find your purpose, viveka is the practice of learning to tell the difference between what you genuinely value and what you've been conditioned to value. The man I mentioned at the start eventually found his way through this, not by trying more things, but by sitting down and doing something he'd never done. He made two lists. The first list was everything he'd achieved or pursued because someone important to him expected it. The second list was everything he'd ever done where he lost track of time, where he felt absorbed, where he would have done it even if no one was watching and no one was paying. The gap between those two lists is where your actual nature lives, and for most people, that gap is enormous. He looked at his second list and saw a pattern he'd been dismissing for 20 years. He was drawn to systems, to understanding how things worked underneath the surface. He'd done it as a kid taking apart electronics. He'd done it reading philosophy on weekends. He'd done it informally coaching junior employees, which he'd always written off as just being helpful. That pattern was his svabhava, his nature, and once he could see it clearly, his swadharma, his natural function, became obvious. Not a specific job title, a direction, a mode of being in the world that felt like his own. The practice I'm describing has 3 steps. First, audit your choices. Go back through the major decisions of your life and ask, whose voice was loudest when I made this? Yours or someone else's? Second, track your absorption. For the next 2 weeks, notice what activities make you lose track of time, not what you think you should enjoy, what actually pulls you in. Third, look for the pattern underneath the activities. It's rarely the specific thing, it's almost always a quality of engagement, a type of problem, a way of being with people or ideas or systems. This is how to find your purpose in the Vedic sense, not by inventing it, not by following a passion, by removing layer by layer what isn't you. What's left is not a career path, it's a self, and from that self, the right direction becomes clear in a way that no amount of outward searching ever produces. The Gita calls this the path of self-knowledge jnana, and it says this path, more than any other, leads to liberation, not liberation in some abstract spiritual sense, liberation from the exhausting performance of being someone you're not. That subtraction process sounds clean on paper, but in practice, most people hit a wall because the conditioning runs deeper than a 2-column list can reach. If you've tried to work through the purpose question on your own and you keep circling back to the same confusion, the fastest way through it is a real conversation, not a course, not another framework, a conversation where someone who has worked through this with dozens of people sits with you and helps you see what you can't see from inside your own head. I offer a free 15 to 30-minute consultation call. No pitch, no agenda other than to understand exactly where you're stuck and give you a clear next step, whether we ever work together or not. You'll walk away from that call knowing specifically what's blocking you and what to do about it. The link to book is in the description. It's free, it's personal, and it's designed so that even if nothing else comes from it, you leave with something concrete. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Tell me in the comments, when you think about your own purpose, what's the loudest voice that gets in the way? Is it someone else's expectation or your own fear?